The amount of opportunity before South Australia at the moment is effectively unprecedented.
The people of South Australia do have a real choice about the things that matter.
This is what a serious party of government looks like, determined to make a material difference to people's lives.
Labor think that they've got this next election in the bag, but it's not over till it's over.
Live from Adelaide, this is the Sky News and the Advertiser South Australia Leaders Debate. Now your host, Kieran Gilbert.
Hello and welcome to the Sky News Advertiser Leaders Debate. Great to have your company, and we're delighted to welcome the opposition leader Ashton Hurn and the Premier Peter Malinauskas for this final debate of the campaign. We've had the coin toss. The Liberal leader will kick off with an opening statement, then we'll get stuck into the debate. But Liberal leader, over to you.
Thank you very much. Look, we live in an amazing state. In fact, it's the best in the nation. And I love the city, I love the country, I love footy at Adelaide Oval, I love the farms and the towns that make our state strong. And some people this election campaign have said that perhaps my pitch isn't sexy enough, perhaps my pitch isn't flashy enough, but here's the thing. I'm actually focused on the things that matter. And the Premier, he's been very caught up in the razzle-dazzle that he's lost sight of what matters most to the people of South Australia. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the big events, I love the footy, I love the concerts, they're all fantastic and they do make our state vibrant. And I want all of that. But I also want South Australian families to be able to afford to pay their power bills. I want them to have access to a world-class health system that looks after them when they need it most. And I also want families who are busting their guts out to feel like they're getting ahead and not falling behind. Because a good government should be able to do both. They should be able to celebrate the fantastic things that make our state special, but also get the important things right. And right now, that balance just isn't there under the Premier. And if I'm elected as Premier, my team and I won't have the bread and butter issues as an afterthought. They'll be the priority.
Premier, to you.
Well, thank you, Kieran, and Sky News and the Advertiser for hosting the debate and the Leader of the Opposition. South Australia has never been in a moment quite like the one that we are currently in. We have the fastest growing economy in the country by a very long way, leading the nation, ahead of even Western Australia. We've got the fastest housing growth rate in the country. Our real wages are growing faster than the rest of the country. The whole nation looks at South Australia very differently today than at any other point in the past. And there's a reason for it. It's because this state has momentum. Momentum that is generating more opportunities to more people in our state, which is why young South Australians are now proud to call this place their home today and into the future. And it's only just begun, because the size of the economic opportunity that is before our state is set to explode over the years ahead. And the only thing that matters is making sure that we translate that economic opportunity to improve living standards for people, which is why my campaign has had a focus on policy in two key areas: education, training and skills. So we're investing in young people to have the skills to unlock those high-wage jobs. And the second is housing, building more homes for more people to make sure that the dream of having a roof over your head that you own is still alive in South Australia. That's serious policy work for a serious party of government, and the stark choice is before everybody. A party of government that is disciplined, united, a centrist Labor government getting things done, or a party that is completely absorbed by their own internal divisions in a way that's exploded in recent days. This is the choice before South Australians this week and on the weekend, and we will continue to work hard to earn the trust of the people of this state.
Premier, thank you, and Liberal leader. Let's start with some breaking news in this final debate. We've got the final Advertiser YouGov poll. I want to bring it to our viewers and get your reaction to start our discussion this afternoon. Labor's primary vote up a touch, 38%. Liberals down 1%, but the big elephant in the room, One Nation, 22% primary. On a two-party basis, that's 59-41 to Labor if it is replicated on Saturday, a landslide record win. And on preferred Premier, some green shoots, maybe too late, but Ashton Hurn up 3 points, the Premier down a couple of points. Ashton Hurn, you've called it a mountain to climb. You've been realistic about it. You've had a good campaign personally. Has your party left you too much baggage to carry, firstly? And secondly, is it a perfect storm up against One Nation as well?
Oh, look, there's no doubt that we've had some challenges, but really throughout my time as being the leader, I've never sought to use that as an excuse. I'm a straight up country person who just is playing the cards that I've been dealt. And my team and I do have some serious policies out there. We're really excited about, in particular, our focus on affordability, because that's what everyone's talking to me about. And one thing that I've been really clear on is that I'm not going to be one of these navel-gazing politicians who becomes a commentator. That's just not my style. I'm focused on getting outcomes for the people of SA. And yes, this poll is obviously here today. There are numerous polls throughout election campaigns, and I'm sure the Premier would share this view, even though I do think he thinks he's got the election in the bag. The only poll that matters is election day. So I'll keep working right up until Saturday at 6 p.m.
Premier, there's one finding in this poll that I want to get your thoughts on. It says, essentially, a majority of One Nation voters, they don't cite the policies. A majority, in fact, only 10% of One Nation voters cite their policies. The reason they intend to vote for One Nation, the majority say the major parties don't represent them. What do you say to those voters?
Well, the thing about One Nation is their leader lives in Queensland. I live here in South Australia. Since the day I got this job, all I've done is fought for the people of this state and fought for the future economic potential of South Australia and all of that underpins it. And when I wake up on Sunday morning, whatever the result of the election is, I'll wake up in South Australia. Pauline Hanson will be in Queensland. And the people of this state have a choice to make. Who do they want to lead their government that will fight for this state and them? And the only party of government that is dedicated to actually having the policy effort to unlock the opportunity is us. The Libs are tearing themselves apart. There's been open warfare.
You're the only one you're the one that's so focused on talking about the Liberal Party. You spend more time talking about the Liberal Party than you do about your policies.
The Leader of the Opposition is welcome to interject. What I talk about is a choice before people of South Australia, and they can choose Labor, that's delivering for the state, got us in a position unlike anyone we've been in before. We're united, we're disciplined, we've got a policy for the future, and the Libs, who have broken out into internal warfare in recent days. That's not a commentary on the Liberal Party.
You're the only one that's focused on that.
That's not a commentary of the Liberal Party. That's a commentary on the choice before South Australians. Now, One Nation represent a choice too, and that's a choice for a party led by a Queenslander, for a party that in the lower house, no one seems to know who their candidates are.
Yeah, please say something on that in terms of the, the focus that has been on One Nation throughout this campaign, and clearly all of the eyes of the nation are on South Australia to see how it will play out. But I do think that when voters feel like they're being ignored, they look to someone who's going to spice it up. And that's important, of course, but it's not just about who can spice things up, it's about who's going to get things done, and that is not One Nation. I agree with the Premier. I think with One Nation, they're obviously a Queensland-based party. They are very Queensland-focused. We need South Australian policies on the table because that's what people are voting for.
The one big issue that I know both of you recognise is people are hurting in terms of the hip pocket, the Bowser, the price has gone through the roof. I want to play, throughout our discussion this afternoon, comments and questions from some voters. Let's start with a few thoughts on cost of living.
Cost of living, that's always going up. Everything's going up.
Yeah, it is very expensive to go shopping. Yeah, so that is a big concern to me.
The biggest one is the cost of living, the council rates and all that.
We think it's going up, nothing's coming down, and the wages don't go up too. It's, it is a big issue, the cost of living. Yeah, everyone's struggling.
Now, Premier, the jobs growth has been strong. It's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, labour market in the nation, but largely in government-driven sectors. Do you need to drive productivity, get jobs growing in the private sector?
Absolutely. We have always had an impetus to grow the private sector as much as the public sector. Public sector has been increasing in terms of numbers simply because we're employing more doctors and nurses, which is important. But in terms of private sector, what we are seeing is growing wages in the private sector faster than the public sector. That's a good sign, tick. Secondly, in the economic growth numbers that the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, released during the course of the campaign, showed that South Australia's economic growth rate was 5%. The next best state was Western Australia on 3.2%. But critically, on private sector investment, new private capital investment in South Australia, it grew at 4.8% in the December quarter. The national average was 0.4%. We were 4.8. The nation was below 1%.
So you feel like that's trending in the right direction?
That is absolutely trending in the right direction. because the private sector has got to work to unleash the opportunities here before us. We haven't introduced any new taxes. We have provided certainty of tax policy, which stands in stark contrast to other jurisdictions in Australia. And we're delivering budget surpluses. Budget surpluses, not forecast, Kieran, actually delivered, which is why we've got the second best credit rating in the country. So all of these things are combined to deliver an environment for people to invest. Now, why does that matter? It doesn't matter to your viewers that you just heard then, unless they are seeing that translate to improved living standards. Now, real people and real politicians are honest about the fact that I don't control the price of petrol any more than the leader of the opposition does, and we shouldn't pretend trying. But what we can do is make sure that people's incomes and their wages are going up, and that is happening in South Australia.
Okay, well let's hear from the Liberal leader.
Yeah, the Premier he quotes a lot of stats, and I think that that's fair enough and fine for him, but it's completely out of touch with what people are feeling. I mean, we just heard from a number of people who are saying that cost of living is their number one concern. And the government's had 4 years to put some serious cost of living pressure relief, and they haven't. They've waited until 3 seconds before the election to realise that it's an issue. And name one cost of living measure you've done this term.
Doubled the cost of living concession, which is an impact.
So who does that apply to? Those that are out there working hard every day?
Doubling the cost of living concession provides a massive... You asked me to name a policy, I announce it, and then you dismiss it. Well, you say that to the people that are the beneficiaries of it.
You've got to get out in the real world and stop quoting all of these statistics, because there are people out there who aren't feeling any relief, Peter. I think you can see that. If you actually get your boots on the ground, then you'd be able to see that people aren't feeling it.
And the Leader of the Opposition is welcome to continue to interject.
Well,
I will wait my turn, and I will make this point. Ashton started the campaign saying, I'm going to focus on crime and I'm going to focus on cost of living. Do you know how many policies that the Leader of the Opposition has named on crime since she's become the Leader of the Opposition? Zero. They're all from the former bloke. All from the former bloke.
We're a Liberal party. We're a Liberal party.
And then on cost of living, she said that was going to be her second focus. And to be fair to the Leader of the Opposition, she has announced cost of living policy during the course of this election. And do you know what it was? To undo the cost of living relief that the former Leader of the Opposition had. The only cost of living policy changes the Leader of the Opposition has made is to undo her promise on water bills and then to undo her promise on tax cuts.
Well,
so as far as cost of living measures...
The Liberal Party is going to the election with a really comprehensive program when it comes to cost of living. We've got 50-cent fares, which you screw your nose up at. That's something that's worked really... But does that? What's the issue with that? Those are the policies that the Liberal Party is taking to the election, and that's the banner that I stand with. I'm the leader of the Liberal Party who's put forward these.
You're just copying the old bloke.
Are you interrupting or not?
Because you're just copying the old bloke.
Chopping and changing in a way that I'm pretty used to seeing you do. But we are focused on affordability. That's number one for us. The Premier's been out there talking about housing. We've been speaking about housing too, because it does matter. It's a key cost of living issue, and it's also something that provides security to so many families.
I want to play, in fact, let's segue into that next comment from some voters on housing.
My family's trying to find a house right now, and it's not even just that they're so expensive, there's also so little options, and we're struggling.
I've wanted to own property for a long time. I think the issue that I perceive is mainly the gap between wage growth and property prices. So it's more so that our wages, especially as graduates, won't really be sufficient to get the borrowing power that we need.
Not thinking I'm going to be able to leave home till I'm 45 at the moment.
I'll hopefully make some big bank in the future and be able to afford one, yeah. I'll just stay with mum and dad till I'm 40 though. Mum makes good food, so why not?
Mum makes good food. That's a good bit of advice from that bloke.
I might respond to that because there's a few things. Firstly, we're at the fastest housing growth rate in the country at the moment. That's not an accident. It's because we instituted policies that Ashton's Liberal Party opposed.
What are they? Including on water infrastructure, including on a whole range of developments around town that you say you're opposed to. Okay, let's take Glenside on the corner of Green Hill Road and Glen Osmond Road. We're building a 20-storey tower there that we want to see happen, and you're opposed to it. You're opposed to it. You're out there campaigning in it. Similarly, more housing in McGill, which we've done in conjunction with the community. How's
you're
the
opposing
land release going? Have you laid a single slab?
You ask questions, I answer.
Brick?
You oppose Southwark. Every development we come up with, to the extent, don't believe me, just listen to what the Property Council of Australia says, Kieran. Hardly the bastion of Labor economic policy, hardly the most enthusiastic supporter of Labor governments traditionally. The Property Council of Australia has endorsed my government and criticised Ashton and her team for being anti-development. You don't get new homes for those young people unless you're building more homes. They're going to do a tax cut, which is going to drive house prices up. We're going to do a tax cut to drive new housing stock.
Let's hear your response to that.
I mean, the Premier
Are you standing in the way of development, which is obviously desperately needed?
It is, and in fact, all of the supply measures that the Premier has announced in terms of the land release, we support those. We think that clearly supply is a really big part of the puzzle, of course, but affordability is also key. And we've got stamp duty policies that particularly will support first home buyers. If you're a first home buyer, then you'll be able to save up to 50 grand on your stamp duty. And there is a difference between what the Premier is putting forward and what the Liberal Party is putting forward, in that the Premier and the Labor government, they want to force you to live in certain geographical areas.
Not true.
It is. All of your policy direction is
not true.
is on that. And for us, we're saying if you want to live in the suburb that you grew up in, that your grandkids live in, then you should be able to. So our policies are directly about getting the housing market moving again. That's true when it comes to downsizing, and it's true when it comes to first home buyers.
So self-respecting economists who understand the way markets work, and I'm a pro-market Labor leader, understand that if you want to see prices moderate, the growth in prices, you've got to have more supply. Now, it is true. This is a clear point of difference for people at this election.
Yep.
The Leader of the Opposition...
Live where you want to live.
The Leader of the Opposition has a policy to abolish stamp duty for all first-home buyers on all stock. My policy is to have abolished stamp duty for new builds. Very important distinction. And the reason why that matters, Kieran, is because when you've got two first-home buyers bidding for the same house with more money in the pocket,
how many downsizers do you know
they drive the price
that wants to want to wait years to build a new home?
They drive the price up. And if you drive the price up, you're achieving nothing at all. In fact, you're actually denying people choice. Our policy drives new supply.
It's out of touch with reality.
Without new supply, you're only making the problem worse. And people get it, Kieran. I've been out there talking to people on the ground about it. They know that first home buyer grants and just putting more money in people's pockets to drive up the same price in value, the only person that wins out of that is the vendor.
You've got a lot
of the buyer.
You've got a lot of infrastructure happening. The north-south corridor. There's one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure in the state's history. Many other bits of work. You've got the hospital, the new hospital coming on as well. You do need immigrants, don't you? And you made that point.
Yes.
The elephant in the room is One Nation.
Yes.
Corey Bernardi's not running for the lower house. That's why he's not here. And, polling maybe would suggest he would be, but he's not running in the lower house. Can I ask you about this question of immigration? Because you do need workers, otherwise how on earth do you get all those projects done? But then how do you house them?
Well, I'm the only person in this campaign that's speaking honestly about the role of a controlled, skilled migration program. And not just skilled migrants, we also need some unskilled migrants too. If we don't have a thoughtful, calibrated migration program in this country, the economic opportunities in South Australia will pass us by. They'll end up somewhere else in the world. And our kids will miss out on higher paid jobs. Now, I know that's not a popular view in some quarters, but the reason why I'm standing here as Premier of the state is because I'm willing to say the things that others aren't, not just chasing votes, in order to be able to achieve improved living standards. Now, what do we need? We need to make sure that our workforce projections as a state are married up with a housing policy. And I gave a major address at CEDA that outlined how we're going to take South Australia from having the fastest housing growth rate in the country and accelerate it even further again to accommodate the fact that we want more housing supply in the system.
Because you do need those, do you accept that you do need those workers?
Absolutely. And I represent a regional community in the Barossa Valley in the Northern Adelaide Hills, and we do need more people coming in, but we need to do it in a skilled way. And it's not a radical thought to say, let's make sure that we've got migration levels that also match our ability to build the homes that people need, because that is driving part of this flirtation with One Nation. It is to do with housing affordability. That's just an honest comment. But at the end of the day, the Premier again talks a big game when it comes to housing. And he was out there saying, this big announcement saying you've got grand plans to build, 13,500 homes each year. But that doesn't even match the National Housing Accord that you've signed up to. That requires 16,000 each year. And you want to give yourself a pat on the back for duping South Australia, essentially, for building less than is required.
Happy to talk about the numbers, Kieran, because South Australia has always built somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 new homes a year.
Why not?
But you're still not hitting the target.
I'm happy to answer the question. We have got that from 8,000 to 10,000 homes a year up to 12,500 homes a year. This is the only jurisdiction in the country in a report that's been released in the last 24 hours that shows our rental vacancy rate is improving as a result of that.
Now, rental market in Australia.
Our plan is to go up from 12,500, no it's not, 12,500 to 13,500 because that's the sweet spot of what's able to achieve that gives us moderation in price growth.
So what's the National Housing Accord?
The National Housing Accord was a number set by the Commonwealth. The number that I know is necessary, that we have developed in conjunction with industry, is that number, 13,500 homes a year. And it's a plan to actually make it happen.
I want to move on.
Her plan drives prices up. Ours builds more homes.
They sledge you as Party Pete. And you look at the debt level, it's up to $50 billion in the forward estimates, or nearly. It's just under, isn't it? So is that? Can you repay that?
Absolutely, because this is a plan that is better than the Leader of the Opposition's. The Leader of the Opposition has a policy that she's taking to this election to actually make debt levels higher in South Australia than what is the case under Labor. And more than that, if you don't believe that, just look at what the budget papers are in comparison to the last two governments. Our government has a debt number that currently is sitting 30 to 32
billion. What was it when you took office?
Which is less than what Rob Lucas...
What was the last state budget?
I'm answering that question.
24 billion.
In the mid-year budget review that was handed down by Rob Lucas and Stephen Marshall, the Liberal leaders, just before the last election, took debt out to 32 billion. We've been able to get that number down. We've delivered lower debt than what they were planning.
We're climbing again.
And we delivered lower debt than what they were planning, and into the future, we've got lower debt than what they are planning again. And that is
when it comes to economic
choice.
Management, I think that we've seen time and time again that the government is too cute by halves. They've got, the last 4 years alone, every year, government, you set your own budgets and you look at all the things that you'd like to achieve. And you've blown them by $4.8 billion, Peter. And, you run this line that Tom Cootes and Tonus has come up with that, the Liberals, what's that going to do for frontline health workers and what's that going to do for hospitals? Instead of just reflecting honestly and saying, how about we just get back to bread and butter management of the state economy? Because to get on top of the debt levels, it can't just click your fingers and it's going to happen overnight. But you've got to show some will and you've got to show some discipline, and that is lacking from the Premier.
So, in order to be able to accommodate the fact that we're building the biggest infrastructure projects in the history of the state, which I understand enjoy bipartisan support, you have to do a couple of things. Firstly, you have to make decisions to not spend more than's coming in. And their election policies between cutting bus fares...
You haven't seen our costings. You've come up with this fanciful number.
So cutting bus fares, cutting stamp duty for absolutely everybody, promising water bills will go down, then back up again, all these chopping and changing of policy. But when you stack it all up, they've got more money going out than what's coming in. And that means higher debts.
Not
more than that.
You haven't actually seen the
But if you actually look at this
and you haven't released yours either.
If you actually look at this government's record that is available in publicly assessed Treasury numbers, a few things. We have delivered budget surpluses, not once, Kieran, 4 times. I can't remember that happening in my lifetime, Kieran.
You still got debt growing. I want to ask you, why don't you look at something like tolls on the road? My friend Paul Starrick from the Advertiser, he suggests you've got to at least look at tolls for freight.
Yeah.
Why don't you look at that? Because the sustainability of that debt, there's a question mark over that.
We invest in the public infrastructure for the public. Where we see tolls in other parts of the country, that's because it's privately owned infrastructure. Roads owned by private companies that then fleece motorists. Our policy is to have the roads, not too dissimilar to public transport, owned by the government, that is to say owned by the people for the people, rather than other companies' profits. Now, if the Leader of the Opposition has got a different policy, I'd be very keen to hear it.
Of course
I didn't think so. But when you look at the record, the former Liberal government was privatising public transport. We undid that privatisation and brought it back into public hands.
It's too politically difficult.
It's not
because
about being political.
The SA infrastructure chairman says you should look at it. Tolls for building new roads and growing the state.
They're welcome to offer all the advice that they like, but I believe in infrastructure for people. Now, what matters is sustainability, and the economic growth that we've been able to achieve in conjunction with some difficult decisions we've made in government have resulted in us delivering budget surpluses, forecast surpluses again across the forward estimates, and having the second best credit rating in the country. They are facts that do not lie.
On to things like Live Golf. That has been a huge success. Do you welcome that? And that driven by the Premier searching for those opportunities and sort of being proactive on things like that. And we heard today the Bahrain F1 potentially
Look,
that didn't happen, but he's pushing for it.
I do think that the events add to the vibrancy of South Australia for sure, but it matters where events sit on your list of priorities. And I think that for the Premier, events are above getting the basics and the important things right. Now, the Premier knows, and he's said so in the Parliament, that I actually was an advocate for having Gather Round in the Barossa Valley, and it's obviously in the Barossa and it's been a huge success. But the people of South Australia want you to also focus on what is important to them. And the Premier he's blinded by the razzle-dazzle. He does enjoy, rubbing shoulders with celebrities, and that's all fine. Like, who doesn't, right? Not that I've enjoyed that, I've got to say. But when you are the Premier of the state, you've got to get the important things right. And when people are talking about an inability to pay their power bills, they're worried about public transport, they're worried about the housing market, that's when I think you can see that the government just hasn't got its priorities in check.
Can you get that? Have you got that balance right, Premier?
Absolutely, which is why the state's economy is growing fastest in the nation. We've employed 600 extra doctors, 1,000 extra nurses.
But it's thanks to the prop-up of the taxpayer.
You keep interrupting.
It's thanks to the taxpayer.
And ambulances are now running on time, Kieran. When you call 000, mate, here in South Australia, the ambulance is rolling up on time. Under the former government, there was a 2 in 3 chance that they were going to run late. Now, in respect to the events, this is an economic policy, Kieran. This is an economic policy that is seen to South Australia having the tightest labour market in the country. That's how you grow wages, is you make sure people have got a job. And I was with a small business this morning who was very grateful the government has had a policy to use major events, not just to make the place busy when they're on, but as a platform for the state's economic opportunity that is resulting in private...
The Greens aren't happy with what you're doing at North Adelaide Golf Club, are they?
No, they're not. They're not. And their lives... not just the Greens.
Down trees.
No, it wasn't just the Greens. It was the Greens and the Liberal Party at one protesting us turning a golf course into a better golf course to host an international event. You were protesting
the Premier wants to spend more time talking about this. He pivoted very quickly away from talking about all the great things, apparently, that the small business was telling to you. This morning, I was with a small business.
So if I could just finish the point, Kieran,
and
the Leader of the Opposition said continues to interrupt.
I'll come back in one moment.
Sure.
And the small business was saying to me that their prices have gone up 37% in the last little while. That is almost impossible to absorb. 6 years ago, their energy bill was $600 a month, and now fast forward to today, $2,000 a month. And so these are the very real issues that the Premier is failing to get on top of, because he is too focused on the razzle-dazzle. And more than that, there's actually there's also no foresight or proactiveness in terms of things like payroll tax.
Okay, Premier.
Okay. The one thing that businesses want more than anything else, Kieran, is customers. They want customers. And when you see economic growth happening in the way that it is in South Australia, what we see is demand. That's the first thing. Now, I've seen periods in this state's history where there isn't demand in the economy. People literally waking up trying to work out where the work is coming from. Those days are over because of the policies that we've instituted, policy that they've opposed. They say they support major events when they're in one room and then oppose them in another. No. They say they're for the live golf and then they oppose the golf course on another. And all that is a demonstration of the policy flip-flop that does result in one nation getting a clear run.
How many days with live golf and AFL gather round? How many days are they combined?
So what we see is sustained economic demand in the community. Now, in terms of prices, I've always taken an approach. In fact, I did it 4 years ago on this very debate stage and made it clear that I think, particularly at a state level, we're better off just being honest with people and say, I don't control the price of petrol or Weet-Bix. What I do is make sure that the economic conditions that are within my control are there to actually provide demand, to be able to provide custom, to be able to inform improved living standards. And that's the honest truth. And we've seen leaders of both political persuasions, right? Liberal and Labor, I've seen both of them do it. They are going to promise to reduce the price of this and the price of that. It just doesn't happen, right? Because we live in a market-based economy. Far better to be honest about it and then provide cost of living relief in targeted ways that make a difference, which is why I've got a policy that I'm taking to this election to abolish school fees. The most expensive thing that anyone can do is raise a family. Well, we're making school fees free because we can afford to do it. We're giving camps for free because actually it's about getting kids off screens. We're making it a lot easier for parents to be able to get access to OSH, out of hours school care. So that they can continue to do their job without having to worry about their job finishing at 3:30
And you do
to
want,
pick the
I
kids
know
up
one
on
thing
time.
that you both agree on is AUKUS and the contribution of the Osborne shipyard. I want to ask you, Premier, first of all, but I'll get the Liberal leader's thoughts on this as well. As I look at the comments by Donald Trump overnight, questioning Australia and as to why we haven't sent ships to the Strait of Hormuz, but his unpredictability, the uncertainty around the world, is it something you can pin the future of the state on in large part by saying these are jobs for the future? Is AUKUS on a firm foundation?
Well, I think the events of recent weeks in terms of geopolitical insecurity demonstrate exactly why this country needs to build ships for ourselves. There won't be any ships to send anywhere if we haven't got any, right? If we want ships to send places overseas to deal with geopolitical instability, we've got to have them in the first instance, which is why we've got to build them. No one else is selling, Kieran. You've got to be able to build them for yourselves. And that's what this policy does. And regardless of who is in the White House or in Downing Street, this nation needs to have a naval capability, plain and simple. Now, thankfully, we have seen in Australia, in the United Kingdom and in the USA, all three jurisdictions have changed their leadership politically and changed the political hue of that leadership. But the policy remains the same. AUKUS is a good thing, and that is because in a globally changing environment, it is strategically in everybody's interests, which is why we've got to build this. Now, the reason why we're short on submarines as a country, the reason why we're short of surface ships in this country is because people have kept chopping and changing the policy.
ALP.
Right? And now we've actually got a policy that we're sticking to.
All right. Ashton?
Yeah, delivering AUKUS is critical because we do need to have this sense of sovereignty, of course. So I agree with all of the things that the Premier's just said there. It is really important, well, probably not everything in terms of the chopping and changing, but to make sure that we do have this sovereign capability right here in Australia is essential. And it's a fantastic opportunity for South Australia that we'll be at the forefront of. My main concern about the program in general is how can we make sure that small businesses here in South Australia can tap into that opportunity? Because whilst defence spending is going up, and that's a good thing, we are seeing the investment or the opportunities for small businesses to tap into that getting fewer and fewer. So I think that we do need to work together in somewhat of a bipartisan manner to make sure that there is work flowing directly to South Australian companies and not just the big primes. Because I've said this comment a few times that I don't want South Australia to become some form of glorified IKEA where you've got companies from all over the world doing the manufacturing and doing the heavy lifting, and then we're just putting the stuff together here in South Australia. We want to make things.
We've got an opportunity for you both to ask a question of each other, if you'd like to kick off.
Yep. Premier, you committed to voice, treaty and truth. In Victoria, they've spent $700 million on treaty. Will you rule out reparation payments in your treaty plan?
We've never had a policy for reparations, never had reparations, even when there's been a treaty in the past. And what I do want to acknowledge, and indeed thank the Leader of the Opposition for, is that for the fact that when the voice legislation came into the Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition didn't oppose it. To Ashton Hurn's credit, she did not vote against the voice legislation, and that record is there in Hansard in the Parliament for everybody to see. And I'm very proud of the fact that the voice hasn't actually been interventionist, it hasn't disrupted anyone, it hasn't had any major cost challenges. In actual fact, it's advocated for policy that saves the taxpayer money. And I thank the Leader of the Opposition as now...
Is it generating much interest though in terms of the community it represents, in terms of the voting?
I think it... Look,
the participation rate was below the first time.
The voice is a pretty modest proposition. It's got caught up in a lot of political headwinds, but, it basically says, look, we've got some ideas that might help our community, and then it's up for the government of the day, whoever it is, to either listen to those ideas or dismiss them. And we've done a bit of both. But the fact that the Leader of the Opposition didn't vote against the voice in the Parliament...
How much do your treaty plans cost?
I've just answered that. But the fact that the Leader of the Opposition didn't vote against the voice,
and
I think it's to her
Premier's
credit.
fine to make those comments. We do have a policy that we're taking to the election to repeal the voice. This was, I think over the course of looking at the outcomes that have come from it, this is not something that has delivered results. And there's no denying that we do need to see a closing of the gap.
Let's be honest.
When it comes to education outcomes, when it comes to health, And that's why we're committed to reinstating the parliamentary committee that's still listening to Indigenous Australians and South Australians, which is really important. And we hope that that can deliver some outcomes.
So let's be honest about it. Let's call it as it is, Kieran, shall we? So the Leader of the Opposition didn't oppose the voice when she could have voted against it in Parliament, and now she's saying she is opposed to it. Why is that? Well, it's because she's worried about One Nation in the polls, and she's chopping and changing her position. And the reason why,
I said this day one when I became the leader.
if there is reason why One Nation's doing well in the polls, is because there's a leader of the Liberal Party that can't quite work out where they stand on issues. Now, as objectionable as I might find a number of positions that One Nation have, at least you know where they stand. At least you know where they stand. Whereas with the Liberal Party in South Australia, they can't work out if they're for development or anti it, for voice, anti-voice.
And this goes to the heart, really. Of, the Premier talks a big game about, he likes to be the positive man. I think it's safe to say that you go out pretty regularly on good news. You never handle the bad news.
There's a lot of good news.
But you're never there with the bad news.
Every question
and when was the last time you did a press conference to release the ramping stats in SA? Which are twice as bad the last time of the last election when you promised to South Australians that you'd fix it and you urged people to vote like their life depends on it. And now, because it no longer suits your political purposes, you don't want to talk about it. You've been desperate to change the goalpost since you were elected because you knew that it was a dishonest thing to do.
I'm happy to address this question because
you haven't said I'm sorry.
I have. I've been happy to address this question over and over again.
I am sorry.
And that is because I think I should.
We've got images from the last campaign, though, the call flutes that were run. You did go very hard on that at the last debate.
And the reason for
that... And it's got worse.
And the reason for that, Kieran, is because South Australians were calling 000 with a life-threatening emergency, call it a heart attack if you like. And the ambulance is rolling up late, mate. And guess what?
But why didn't you say that?
You keep interrupting.
Well, likewise, respectfully, Premier.
The people were calling 000 with a life-threatening emergency, a heart attack, and the ambulance is rolling up late, and they died waiting. Now we've got ambulances rolling up on time.
This must frustrate you because you went big on that last time, and you've
absolutely
argued your case on various other issues, but this is a failure.
I've been very candid about the fact that despite all the government's investments and effort that we've made in the public hospital system, we have not been able to achieve the results that we want in ramping.
You haven't given up on it, though?
Absolutely not. You've got to keep at it. But it is absolutely the single biggest frustration that we've had in terms of the policy not giving the outcome that we're looking for. And I've been upfront about that. And, I've got to wear it.
Next term?
We absolutely can make a difference in a way that, we already have with ambulances rolling up on time. And one of the big challenges, and I'm not saying this to make an excuse because I've got to accept and be accountable for it. But the big challenge is the fact that we haven't been able to get people out of the hospitals as quickly as we should.
Can we get your question, please, now, for the Liberal leader?
Sure. Well, it goes to the heart of the point I was making earlier about the Leader of the Opposition, being for one thing, testing the political breeze, changing a position on another, because we're not really sure what sort of Liberal leader Ashton is. So let me give a clear example. The federal, and I asked her this in the debate the other day, so the Leader of the Opposition has had plenty of time to cogitate on the answer to this. But the federal Liberal Party in South Australia is opposed to the voice. They're opposed to the voice. So if you're a federal MP from the Liberal Party in South Australia, Tony Passon and Alex Antic, they're opposed to the voice, very clear. The South Australian Liberal Party, the state party, is in favour of the voice. That is their stated public policy position. Now, I'm not talking about net renewables, very different thing, as I'm sure the Leader of the Opposition appreciates. I'm talking about net zero. So a very simple question. We know where the federal Liberal Party stand on net zero. We know where the state Liberal Party stand on net zero. Has Ashton changed the position, or can Ashton say to everybody watching today that the state Liberal Party, her state MPs, a government that the Leader of the Opposition leads, are they still committed to net zero? It's a simple yes or no answer.
Yep, and the answer to that is not by 2027. So you've legislated that we've got to hit net zero by 2027.
That's net renewables, Ashton. No, Ashton, I'm happy to explain to you the distinction between net renewables and net zero. Do you not know?
I've been
Okay, well, Kieran, that's a moment in this
I
debate,
have been
because
extraordinarily clear.
do you understand the difference between net zero and net renewables?
Net zero from a South Australian perspective, Premier. We don't have any coal. We don't have any coal in South Australia. This is a classic example.
Yes or no?
This is a classic example.
The difference between net renewables and net zero is what carbon emissions are coming in and out of the atmosphere.
This is a classic example of the Premier trying to conflate federal issues with state issues.
But this is your state policy. I'm asking about your policy, not the federal policy. We know that.
We're not
we at least know where they
focused on that.
stand.
We're focused on making sure that we've got an affordable South Australia. We make it very, very clear that we are not interested in putting ideology ahead of affordability. And this is what the Premier constantly does. He tries to conflate the issues. He tries to, get me to be accountable for the federal government.
No, your policy. This is about your policy. This is about your policy. And Corey Bernardi's standing here right now. If he was standing here running for the whole House, he would say, I'm opposed to net zero. I say I'm in favour of net zero. Ashton Hurn says,
it's relevant. It's
I'm
relevant
not sure.
To the people of. It's relevant
it's absolutely relevant.
At the state
It's absolutely relevant.
We're focused on doing everything that we possibly can to drive down prices in South Australia, put the handbrake on energy bills. Yes, you've got to have goals and ambitions into the future, but unlike the ALP, we're not driven by ideology. We're driven by affordability.
Well, decarbonisation is a major economic opportunity for South Australia, Kieran. Just go talk to the people in Whyalla. They know it. Where we're going to use our state strategic gas reserve to unlock a massive potential for decarbonised.
Is hydrogen still going to work?
Well, happy to go to that, right? So our policy that we have introduced, signed a nation-leading agreement with Santos, is to acquire 20 petajoules of gas per annum from 2030 for the state for the purposes of principally Whyalla, but also other industrial growth, because we believe in gas as being a critical transition fuel for decarbonisation in pursuit of net zero, which the leader of the opposition has confessed that she doesn't even know what it means now.
But that's gas. What about hydrogen?
In respect to hydrogen,
as a source?
That's wrong.
In respect to hydrogen, we do still believe that there is a long-term future there to be able to use hydrogen. But we have made clear that we are choosing to save the steelworks and pursue gas as a policy to achieve decarbonised iron and steel making.
As an excuse for not pushing on with hydrogen, when every private investor was pulling out of it and you stuck with it because of your ego, Premier.
And the leader of the opposition stands here today and still can't tell anybody because either she doesn't know where she stands or is worried about where she stands in respect to net zero, if indeed she knows what it even means.
Do you support that gas plan, though?
Look, I think we absolutely agree that gas is going to play a really important role in making sure that we've got that baseload power into the future. Absolutely. But
Beach Energy is saying that South Australia should look at gas specific for AI and data centres and so on as well, that you need to look at right across the board.
We've got a policy that we're taking to the election, which is all in relation to Torrens Island. So under the Premier's watch, he is what's going to turn off in 2028. We've got a plan to keep that open and work with the private sector to make sure that we've got a guaranteed gas supply. We're really passionate about making sure that we can lower power bills in SA. Part of that is making sure that we have that base load. And the Premier talks about his gas plan, but that's 2030. Like, what's your plans between 2028 and 2030?
So the 2030 is because that's when the gas becomes available. And this is a really important policy for the future of our state that I actually don't think it's got the recognition it deserves, Kieran, because no one else in the country's done it. So what happens at the moment, South Australian gas ends up on a boat going to Korea and Japan for their economic growth. And they're on contracts that are locked up till 2030. As soon as we saw the opportunity that those contracts were coming off in 2030, we got in and sat down with Santos, the nation's second largest gas producer. So rather than that gas going to Japan and Korea for their benefit, it's going to be in South Australia, not Victoria, New South Wales or Western Australia, in South Australia for our use. And we got it at a price and we locked in that contract at a fixed price before the Iran war.
And as a percentage of the energy supply,
that's a great question. 20 petajoules of gas. I mean, I accept that probably doesn't mean anything to most people. If you add up every single household customer in South Australia and every single commercial customer in South Australia, and look at its per annum use, that's 20 petajoules. We've just doubled it. We've doubled that capacity. And that's exclusively for industrial use for the purposes of achieving economic growth. as we've already delivered for the state.
We've looked at climate change and the various flow-on effects of it. One of the big things for South Australians, I know, though, has been the algal bloom, and it's been a tragedy for many marine ecosystems and so on. I want to hear from one expert. Let's have a listen.
Some important funding has already been committed in response to the South Australian algal bloom, but the Senate inquiry has made it clear that we need to move beyond short-term reactive support to long-term biodiversity monitoring, reef recovery and resilience. One of our big concerns is South Australia's vulnerable marine ecosystems, including our kelp forests and rocky reefs, will be overlooked in this next phase. Will your government commit to a dedicated, multi-year, publicly reported biodiversity monitoring and recovery program?
So, Premier, will you commit to that? And secondly, did the government sit on advice that it was toxic for humans?
No. And that's a really important point. I think our public health officials and our marine biologists have done an outstanding job, and I stand by them. I'm not going to be part of these conspiracy theories questioning public health advisors who are doing their level best with complex science. I'm not going to do that. I didn't do it during COVID, and I'm not going to do it now. I'm just not. And, the fact that the Liberal Party were furnishing the Parliament of the state, Kieran, with fake AI-generated documents says more about them than anything else. In respect to the recovery of it, this is really important. It has been a major environmental disaster. I was willing to call it like it was at the beginning. And it breaks my heart because our marine environment is really important ecologically. It's particularly important in terms of biodiversity, but it's also important economically for the state and socially and culturally as well. And when we look at the causes of the algal bloom, they're not all because of climate change, but climate change was a significant driver, which is why I can't believe the leader of the opposition is going to feign interest in a second about the algal bloom, but then says she doesn't care about net zero. It doesn't even know what it is. It just boggles my mind. And so what we need to do is invest in the science and research. We've had a massive uplift in that investment through our $100 million plan. We are investing in native oyster reef restoration, marine life restocking programs, along with seagrass recovery. These things combined, which we are investing a lot of money in conjunction with the federal government, to their credit, is actually seeing the sort of plan that the gentleman was calling for. But you can't say you're serious about the environmental recovery and then not have a serious policy about climate change. Otherwise, you're just pretending.
Is it gone now, the bloom?
All apart from a few sections on the Yorke Peninsula, it's completely clear. And that has been true for a very long time indeed.
Is the advice that it is dissipating?
The advice is that it's clear, with the exception of a part of Yorke Peninsula, which we still remain concerned about. But there is also advice, Kieran, just to be clear about this, that it could come back. I mean, this has never happened before in the history of our country. While it's an algal bloom of this size and scale, the science is immature. So it could come back. But at the moment, we're very grateful for the fact that it's completely cleared up.
All right. Can I get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. And I think that what we saw on ABC's Four Corners goes to the heart of really what is wrong with this government and the Premier in particular, in that they are so focused on their own self-image and managing the PR and the media than they are on actually getting results for South Australia.
We backed in the health advice.
What it said very clearly on the ABC was that there was a massive delay between the notification of the brevitoxins, and there were months before that was made public to the people of South Australia. And I tell you what we did throughout COVID. When information came through, we made it an absolute priority to make sure that that got out to the people of South Australia. And well, also you were calling for close the borders, mass quarantine facilities.
We did close the borders.
Mass quarantine facilities, that would have cost the taxpayer a lot. But at the end of the day, this is about transparency. And when you're the leader of the government, particularly throughout a crisis, you've got to actually take responsibility.
You're saying that the government sat on that information?
Well, the Premier is shielding himself behind Nicola Spurrier. It is very clear. It came to the fore on the ABC Four Corners to say that when the brevitoxins first came to light, it took months before that was made public. And it wasn't even Nicola Spurrier who mentioned it in 11 minutes into the press conference.
Is that good enough? When you saw various South Australians feeling the health effects?
All of the actions that the government took was based on the advice that was put before us as soon as we got it, plain and simple. Now, I think what the Leader of the Opposition is referring to is around the kangaroos. And, of course, there was research that did find that the kangaroos contained brevetoxin, but a very small level that was smaller than what we've seen in the oysters, and more than that, to the extent that the scientific conclusion of that analysis, which did take time, because that's how long it takes to do the scientific work, was that the brevetoxin wasn't the reason for the kangaroo's death, which is a point that was omitted by Four Corners, which was interesting within of itself.
I want to look at GP services, aged care, and let's hear from one GP in particular.
The Australian Medical Association and the doctors it represents have repeatedly warned your government that its controversial payroll tax has increased patient costs and made them delay seeking care from GPs or not to seek care at all. This leads to people getting sicker and presenting to emergency departments. Do you think that the increased revenue stream from this tax justifies the harm that it is doing?
Ashton, Hurn, your thoughts?
Well, we've got a commitment that we're taking to the election to get rid of the payroll tax grab. Obviously, that's come out of a legal determination in New South Wales. Various states have kind of managed that differently, and including in South Australia, there's a unique position, particularly around bulk billing. But we're just saying, no, we don't think that having that cost passed on to the people of South Australia is okay, because if you can't afford to go and see your GP, if it's too hard, then where do you end up? You do end up in emergency departments. And, you know, understandably, lots of people will say, well, isn't GP a federal responsibility? And to a certain extent, it is. But on the same token, we've got the Premier wanting to step into the aged care space because he's not willing to let Canberra get on with their job. He's not willing to step up when it comes to GPs. And GPs are at the heart of the healthcare system in South Australia. And more than our policy that we're taking to the election on getting rid of payroll tax for GPs, we're also going to make it easier for people to get in by providing them some money so that they can have extended hours, including 8 p.m. on weekdays and over the weekend on Sundays. That's really important. And we also have some incentives on the table to get more people in.
And you have got that incentive for aged care to get that being built at a faster clip. In terms of the GP payroll tax, is that a valid point that the GP made there?
So what we did following the New South Wales court determination that resulted in this change, as Ashton accurately points out, is we sat down with the Royal College of GPs in South Australia and said, look, okay, obviously we've got a change as a result of this court ruling. Let's work collaboratively to formulate a policy around how we can make an appropriate intervention here, which is what we did. And that resulted in us stopping the application of payroll tax for GPs for bulk billing services. So if you're a GP practice that bulk bills, or you're a patient that goes to a GP and gets access to bulk billing, it'll be exempted from the payroll tax regime. And that was done through a collaborative working agreement that we actually worked with the College of GPs. There are other things that matter to GPs that I think we can have an influence on at a state level, even though it is principally a federal government responsibility. And my main concern is actually about access to GPs in regional communities, which is why we've announced...
You don't want people putting off visits, obviously.
No, of course not.
No.
And that's why we've stopped it for bulk billing.
Okay.
And then what we've done is we've announced a big training program in Mount Gambier for regional GPs.
Let's go through some... we've only got 5 minutes before your closing statements. There's a couple of quick ones I want to get through, a bit of a rapid fire round of questions. So if you keep these ones a little bit tighter, but the South Australian Writers' Festival, Randa Abdel Fattah, your decision on that, do you feel vindicated by your position? Were you surprised by the ferocity of the reaction nationwide to that controversy?
Vindicated is not a word I'd use. I feel comfortable in the decision I made. I did it exclusively because I thought it was right. It was a question of principle. But I knew about the backlash. No, I knew. When we were working through the issues and thinking about how this would be responded to and played out in the community, I knew there'd be a big backlash. And I knew it would probably come a lot from people who might have otherwise traditionally been Labor voters. And that makes it a tough call, but you've got to assess your conscience and the evidence before you and make a decision. And, you know, there's more than one occasion since I've been Premier or Leader of the Party, I've made decisions which I know people will oppose, even from my side of politics. But that's the deal with leadership. You've got to stand up for what you believe, even if there are political consequences.
I know the opposition leader, you've committed to outlawing some anti-Semitic slogans. Can you elaborate on that for us quickly?
Yep, so we've got plans taken to the election to ban the use of terms like from the river to the sea and globalise the intifada. We think that if you look at what happened in Bondi and the way in which anti-Semitism has been able to seep into Australian society, thanks in large part due to the inaction of Anthony Albanese, we're going to do something about it in South Australia, and so we're really pleased to be taking these laws to the election.
Would you support that? Outlawing those sorts of slogans?
We've already done that. We've outlawed. We've put in laws around.
But go specifically.
Not specifically.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
We put in laws around the swastika and the Nazi salute, for instance, which the Liberal Party supported, to their credit. But here's the problem, Kieran. They've now got Liberal Party candidates that are opposed to these policies, right? They've now got Liberal Party candidates who are saying we shouldn't be banning the swastika and Nazi. In fact, Alex Anti.
You talk such a big game about being focused on what matters, and at your first opportunity, you only want to talk about the Liberal Party.
Well, if you think...
You only want to talk about the Liberal Party.
I think anti-Semitism
Stick
does
to the
matter.
topic.
Well, the topic is anti-Semitism.
Stick to the topic. We've got our policies and we've just spoken about it.
This is her desperate attempt to say, listen, we're strong on anti-Semitism, but we've got people on the Liberal Party who are okay with the swastika.
That person is not a candidate, and we're taking these plans. You won't even rule out whether you support terms like globalise the intifada or from the river to the sea.
Well, I think my record, I'm willing to stand up against anti-Semitism.
But would you like to see those banned?
Islamophobia and any other form of racism is there for everybody to see.
Can I ask you, would you run for federal parliament at some point?
No.
You won't?
It is the privilege of my life to have this job.
So you would rule that out? Because there's a lot of talk that you'll end up there.
Look, and yeah, I've heard that and I have ruled it out and I continue to, because my hand is up to be leader of the state that I call home and that I believe in very much. And when I think about it this way, I said this to Chris Kenny yesterday, that if you think about the Australian Federation, 6 states, a 6-cylinder engine, and the South Australian cylinder, that piston hasn't always been firing, and now it is, Kieran. And that's good for the country, and it's good for South Australia. And if I can continue to lead that effort, that's all I could ever possibly hope for.
Well, just finishing on a bit of a negative, but I do want to get your thoughts on this, because it's plagued the Liberal Party for so long, this divide. Can you heal that party? Because it's had a great legacy over the years in federal parliament and so on, but at the moment, it's so divided. Can you navigate that?
Yeah, I think that the Liberal Party has certainly had quite a number of challenges, and I've lent into those. We are a broad church. When Sir Robert Menzies founded the Liberal Party, he was really clear that he wanted to stitch together everyone that wasn't the ALP. And so it's unsurprising that we've got some pretty broad views in the team. But I'm really focused on the future, and I'm hopeful that we can work right across the broad spectrums of views, because it's really important. The Liberal Party is a party that can deliver practical results for the people of Australia and South Australia, and that's where my focus is.
Well, we very much appreciate you and the Premier being here today. Let's wrap up with some closing statements, if you can kick off for us. Thank you.
Well, I think time and time again we've seen from this Premier that he is more interested in his own image and in navigating the media and the public relations than he is on actually getting results for the people of South Australia. There have been multiple occasions throughout the course of this campaign where I think his judgment has been off and his true character has come through. We've seen it in relation to the releasing of private medical information to journalists, and we've seen it in relation to people like Monica, who have had their own private medical information farmed out to journalists in a desperate bid to shut down media stories on health, the very topic that the Premier went to the last election promising to fix. But if we're elected to government this weekend, then we'll be unashamedly focused on getting the important things right. We'll be cutting the bullshit and we'll be getting back on track when it comes to the bread and butter issues that South Australians are talking to me each and every day. That's about affordability. That's about making sure the next generation can get into the housing market. And it's also on delivering a better health system.
Ashton Hurn, thank you. Premier?
Every election's a choice, Kieran. And there is a big choice before South Australians this week and on Saturday. They can choose between a united, stable, centrist Labor government that is moving South Australia at a pace and in a direction we haven't ever seen before. The rest of the country looks at South Australia very differently today than what was the case 4 years ago, because we're growing our economy, we're growing people's wages, people's living standards can continue to improve with thoughtful, dedicated policy effort. And these are tough jobs that you have to make tough decisions in. And I've demonstrated an absolute willingness to do that, even when I knew it would cop criticism, because I believe in the future of South Australia and I believe in using the position of Premier and the power of the Parliament to make a difference. But you can never do that if you're divided. You can never do that if your party is at war with itself. You can never do that if you take your eyes off the prize. And the only prize that matters to me is making sure that future generation of South Australians can work here, can have a good job, earn a good income so they can afford a roof over their head. And that's not just going to happen. It's only going to happen with serious parties of government making serious policy interventions to make a serious difference. And that's what I'd love the opportunity to continue to do. But it's up to the people of South Australia. And I will finish on this note. The Liberal democracy that we have in this state is civil and respectful. And I take this opportunity to thank all candidates, including One Nation candidates, the Leader of the Opposition, for the way that this campaign has been conducted. Clearly there are points of difference, but it has been done with civility. And I think that's to Ashton's credit, along with all the other candidates participating credit.
Thank you for being a part of this element of the democratic process as well, and a robust but civil debate today. Thank you, Peter Malinauskas, Ashton Hurn. We wish you both all the best for the week.